Zorn, who first appeared in New X-Men Annual 2001, was created by Grant Morrison. Although we were led to believe that the character was a Chinese mutant who had spent most of his life in captivity, in actuality, he was Magneto in disguise. Despite having read through Grant Morrison's run on New X-Men multiple times, as well as reading some of the other X-Men comics that followed his run, I maintain that not only does the reveal of Zorn's true identity not make any sense at all, but at times the retcon that changed Zorn's identity actually makes more sense even in the context of Morrison's run, where the character was always intended to be Magneto in disguise. First, I want to talk about Morrison's original intentions, and how they make no sense at all. As I said, Morrison always intended Zorn to be Magneto hiding within the ranks of the X-Men, sowing seeds of dissent, and forming his own brotherhood of mutants from within the student body of the school. But if you read Morrison's run, this reveal does not feel like it was planned from the beginning. It feels very much like it was an idea he came up with at the last minute and just threw it in there because it was cool. For a story to feel like this is never a good thing. But it's doubly bad when the idea was always present from the beginning and it just doesn't feel like it was. So why does this reveal make no sense? In Zorn's debut issue, the X-Men take down a large mutant prison in China where Zorn was allegedly held prisoner. Later, Magneto claims that these people were his followers and they were just playing along with his plan to infiltrate the X-Men. Okay, unlikely, but let's just say I buy that for now. But how do we explain Zorn taking off his mask in front of the X-Men? Ever since the first X-Men movie, it's basically been understood that Magneto's helmet can block telepathy, just like in the X-Men movies. That's even been imported into the comics in recent years. So if we assume that Magneto used the same technology he has in his Magneto helmet in the creation of the Zorn helmet, then that would explain why Zorn was able to hide his presence among three of the most powerful telepaths in the world. But that brings us right back to Zorn unmasking at the end of the New X-Men Annual. At the least, Emma Frost should have sensed that this guy was Magneto when he took off his helmet. Not to mention that Magneto never had Starhead powers, and if Morrison always intended for this guy to be Magneto, then I would at least like to know how he justifies Magneto having a star brain in this scene. Speaking of Zorn's powers, let's talk about that for a second. Zorn was allegedly a healer, but since Magneto is not a healer and has magnetic powers, we have to examine all of the points when Zorn uses his powers and see if these examples make sense or not. When Cassandra Nova was influencing the Imperial Guard to attack the school, he healed the X-Men who were infected with nano-sentinels. This makes sense because the Sentinels were made of metal, so he just killed them with his magnetic powers. And when Xavier's spine was fixed, this is explained later as Magneto using nano-sentinels to hold his spine together. Then in issues like 127 and 138, Zorn either claims he is too late for his abilities to be of use, or that he believes that using his abilities would be ethically wrong in that case. Okay, fine, but then there are the times that Zorn does things that Magneto just would not be able to do, like when he heals a bird in a temple. This would make perfect sense if it was actually Zorn, but it makes zero sense if this is Magneto pretending to be Zorn. Did he use nano-sentinels to heal that bird's wing just so that it appears that he was a healer since Cyclops was watching? Okay, unlikely, but I guess I can buy it. But what about when Cyclops and Zorn escape from the Imperial Guard in a spaceship? Cyclops tells Zorn to use his star brain to somehow affect G-Type, who has a body made of star material. This one barely makes any sense even if Zorn is Zorn, but if Zorn is Magneto, it makes even less sense. Having control over various metals does not translate to, I can control star people so that we can escape. Not only are there many instances of the Zornito storyline making very little sense from when Magneto was Zorn, but then after the reveal when Magneto is Magneto, there are just as many instances of this stuff just making no sense at all. Chief among them is Magneto acting a little different than what we are used to. Morrison felt that Magneto is a mutant terrorist and should be doing things like huddling humans into cars so that he can throw them into outer space. Myself and many others felt that this was a severe regression of his character. This is maybe something Magneto would have done in 1971, but he was developed from being a mustache-twirling mwahaha villain to being a complex and tragic character who does bad things for reasons that he believes are right. Sure, he might destroy a Russian submarine, but only because it attacked him first. And it was this kind of extremely out-of-character behavior that I believe rallied the creators at Marvel after Morrison left New X-Men. Never in my life have I ever seen so many different people immediately retcon a story all across the board. In Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers, in Chuck Austen's Adjectiveless X-Men, in Chris Claremont's Excalibur, all of these books tried to find a way to make the Magneto is Zorn thing make sense while also not blatantly disregarding the story, and I'd say they got about half of that right. In Claremont's Excalibur, while Charles Xavier is in Genosha burying Magneto's body, he meets none other than Magneto, who explains that the dead body obviously isn't his, and the guy who nearly destroyed all of New York City wasn't him either. Meanwhile, in Chuck Austen's X-Men, the X-Men meet Shin Zorn, a mutant with a black hole for a brain. Apparently, it was his brother, Kuan Yin Zorn, high on the mutant drug kick, pretending to be Magneto, pretending to be Zorn. I guess Kuan Yin was a shapeshifter, but that is kinda glossed over. Then in New Avengers, the real Magneto speaks to the disembodied ghost of Kuan Yin Zorn, who says that he took the form of Magneto because he needed other mutants to follow him. This doesn't really fly because we were told in New X-Men that Kuan Yin was high on drugs and was following orders that he did not understand. But whatever, we'll let this one slide. And speaking of letting things slide, we've also got Shin Zorn saying that his brother was not responsible for all that bad stuff, and that whoever was responsible was still in the midst of the X-Men. I am going to take it that he was referring to the drug kick, which was guiding Kuan Yin, as there may have been a few stray inhalers somewhere on the grounds of the Institute. And as we see years later in Brian Wood's X-Men run, Sublime, the true form of the drug kick, was still kicking, pun intended. So just so that we don't have even more loose subplots running around, I think it's safe to say that Shin was indeed referring to the drug kick as the true mastermind behind his brother's actions. So in short, two brothers, both named Zorn. One of them gets high on drugs, pretends he's Magneto, maybe even thinks he actually is Magneto, and infiltrates the X-Men and dies. Does this explanation fix every plot hole found in the Zorn saga? No, of course not, but it does patch up some of the biggest holes. Does this mean that Zorn is a subject that you should broach to a new comic book reader? Absolutely not. I wouldn't even recommend broaching this subject to a seasoned comic book reader. Even the most veteran comic book fans might still have some trouble with some of these revelations, which is totally understandable. But that is my best effort at explaining Zorn, both as Grant Morrison intended him, and as later writers transformed him. I hope I was at least able to shed a tiny shred of light on this subject for you guys, and I hope that you liked this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. In the meantime, I'll see you guys later on with some other kinds of videos. Take care.